This is a modification of exercise 817 from the textbook. We're going to first prepare a planning budget using our contribution margin format. Then we're going to prepare our revenue or calculate our revenues and spending variances based on a planning budget, and we'll have to calculate a flexible budget. And then finally, we're going to use Excel's goal seek to do a little bit of basic break-even analysis. So let's go ahead again. Our revenues, we make $800 per student times we're expecting 45 students. The variable component of instructor wages is simply $3,080 is what we pay our instructors, and we expect to pay them for 3 courses. Classroom supplies, $260 per student times 45 students. Utilities, $130 per course times 3 courses. Our administrative has both 2 components, cost drivers. One is a per course cost of $15 per course times our 3 courses, plus $4 per student times 45 students. So our total variable expenses then, $21,555, and our contribution margin, 36 minus the 21, $14,445. Let's go ahead and then we've picked up our fixed components of our cost, and here are those fixed components. So our total of fixed expenses then, $10,230, and our net operating income will be our contribution margin minus our fixed expenses, $4,215. Our contribution margin per student, our tuition is $800. Our variable costs per student are $260 for classroom supplies, minus $4 in administrative costs per student. We have a contribution margin per student of $536. All right, let's go ahead and put together our planning budget. Down here, we're going to be grouping all of our expenses together, both the fixed and variable components. Picking up from above, our revenues on our planning budget, $36,000. Our instructor wages, there was only a variable component, $9,240. Classroom supplies, again, there was only a variable component. In fact, I can copy that straight on down. Utilities, though, had a fixed and a variable component. Utilities, $870 fixed, plus $390 variable. Rent, that was only a fixed component, $4,200. Insurance was also only a fixed component, $1,890. Administrative had a fixed component of $3,270 plus a variable component of $225. Our total expenses, $31,785. Hopefully our net operating income will agree with our planning budget above. That's how we can tell we did it right. $42,15, $42,15, we're in business. Next thing we need to do before we can calculate our variances is put together our flexible budget. Flexible budget is based on actual activity levels. We had 42 students at $800 per student. Instructor wages, 3 courses at $3,080 per course. Classroom supplies, 42 students times $260 per student. Utilities, we had a fixed component, $870, plus a variable component of $130 per course. Rent, purely fixed. Insurance, purely fixed. Finally, administrative had a fixed component of $32.70 plus $5 per course plus $4 per student. And again, we can sum those up. Our net operating income then again, $33,600 minus $30,993. Now we're ready to go ahead and prepare and calculate our activity and our spending and rate variances. Our activity variance, it's going to be our flexible budget, 33,600, minus our planning budget, 2,400. Now, in Connect, they're typically only putting positive numbers, and we're going to interpret those as favorable or unfavorable. But with your Excel formulas, we're going to find it's much easier just to deal with the negative signs. In fact, we're going to use those to help us decide whether the variance was favorable or unfavorable. For expenses, for instructor wages, again, flexible budget minus our planning budget. And I can copy that formula all the way down. Okay. Then if I want to, I can sum up my total variances. And in terms of my expenses, again, I've got revenues minus expenses. And I believe that should be my total activity variance. Let's check it out to make sure that that is indeed the case, because we can also again calculate our total variance as the difference between our flexible budget minus our planning budget, and there's our 1608. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we need to indicate whether these variances are favorable or unfavorable. Now, typically, we could just put down, use an F or a U, but since we've got formulas here, these amounts will change, and so the variance, which might be favorable right now, could theoretically, let's say if students had increased and been 46, well, the sign of the variance changes from unfavorable to favorable. So we want to put in a logical function here. We're going to use Excel's if function. So equals if parenthesis, and let's go ahead and we can hit the function wizard. Our logical test, we basically want to say that if this number is negative, that means that our activity was lower than expected. So if this is less than 0, we had an unfavorable, so condition U. If it's false, we will put F for favorable. Now notice, since we have text, we would include those text in quotation marks. If instead I wanted this as part of my logical function just to return a number, and I don't know why, say 999, well, in that case, I don't need to have quotation marks around it. But if I want it to return as a text or a label, then I need to have quotation marks around it. So now we can see that if this had been 46, then that variance would have been favorable. Let's change that back to our 42. Now let's go ahead and copy that formula down. So let's copy. Control C is a copy, Control V is a paste, and let's drag that on down here. We've got a couple things going on first. In terms of our variance here, should this be favorable or unfavorable? Well, our expenses were only 10,920, and whenever our expenses are lower than planned, we would have said that that was a favorable variance. So the first thing we notice is that within this particular formula, our inequality needs to be changed from less than to greater than. Now I can copy that all the way on down. And I've got the proper variances. Okay? And in terms of, let's see if that's the proper variance we want down here. At the bottom, no, we had an unfavorable variance, so we need our revenue one down here. Now, the last question is, we may or may not need to do this or think about wanting to do it, but we might want to get rid of these signs or, the F's or the V's where nothing's going on. And if we want to do that, we can go ahead and put in one more if statement. So go back up, we click in front of that equal sign and put in if that cell right there equals 0, comma, then I'm going to just put in 2 quotation marks. I'm going to have nothing going on. Otherwise, we'll go ahead with the rest of our if statement that we had earlier. Go to the end, we'll put in a closing parenthesis, and you can see how we have made those favorable or unfavorable variances disappear when we don't need them. All right, we have to go ahead and calculate now our spending variances. And again, our spending variance is going to simply be our actual minus our flexible. Notice we've got a negative, and this was going to be unfavorable also because our actual revenues are less than. So since we've got an unfavorable one, we can just copy this variance straight on over. And we can even copy, I believe, these formulas right here, right on over also, because again, with our when we do our copy and paste, we can see it's taking the 1, 2 or 3 cells to the right and subtracting 1 from the left. And so 160 looks like the difference. Our actual expenses were less than our flexible budget, and we would say that that is a favorable situation. But let's see. We're gonna have to change that around, aren't we? Flexible budget. No, let's copy the one from above, and then we'll deal with our if statement. Actual minus flexible. It would be negative. Let's copy that on down, and let's put commas here just to get our formatting back. Okay. We can add those up, and now it's our revenues minus our expenses. Let's total up over here. Total expenses 29. Our actual net operating income 32 minus 29. All right, so our actual is higher, so we're going to want definitely a favorable variance down here on the bottom. Okay, and up here we do have, in terms of our expenses, our actuals were less than, so we are going to want a favorable variance. So let's look and interpret here, see if this is what we want. Actual expenses 9,000. We would have budgeted 240. The difference is 160, and we would want to say that that is favorable. So let's copy that on down. Again, 8,000 expenses should have been 10,000. We would say that that is, the difference is indeed 2380, and we would say that that is a favorable variance. Our expenses here were higher, unfavorable. Let's copy that down one more. In terms of our variance down here, we certainly don't want to say that the bottom one here is unfavorable. This one should be, we need to change our sign. Since our net income is higher than our flexible budget, we would say that that is a favorable variance. And again, in terms of working through that, we had savings. Our expenses were $1,900 less than we had expected, favorable. Our revenues were $1,200 less than expected, that would be unfavorable. And the difference between those would be our $763. Finally, we're going to do some break-even analysis using Excel's goal seek. We want to know if we offer 3 courses, what's the break-even number of students per course? Well, we've got right now, so we're looking up here at our contribution margin income statement, 3 courses. We want to know how many students would we need here for this to break even. Let's try 40 students. Let's try 39 students. We can even go lower, can't we? Let's try 35 students. That was too low. Rather than guessing at students, what we can do instead is use Excel's goal seek function. To do that, come up to your data. What if? Goal seek. I would like to set my net operating cell to 0 by changing the number of students. And you can see that at 37.136 students, I would break even. Now, we can't have fractional students, but that's the number I'd like you to put down here. The 37.14. Next question, though, offers 4 courses. What's the break-even point? So before we do our goal seek, we need to change our courses here to 4 courses. Now we can again go up to data. What if? Goal seek. We want to set our net operating income to 0 by changing the number of students. Again, we're going to have more students because we're having to cover that higher per course cost for instructor wages and utilities. We would need 43.15 students. And finally, if it offers 4 courses, how many students does it need to earn a target profit of 5,000? So we've got our 4 courses. Data validation, what if? Goal seek. I would like to set my net operating income to $5,000 by changing number of students. I'm going to need to have 52.48 students. And that should take care of you.